At 26 years old, Declan Rice stands at the peak of English football, a leader, a record signing, a symbol of loyalty and discipline. But behind the calm interviews and composed performances, there is a version of Declan Rice few have ever heard. Because insiders claim that Rice quietly cut ties, hardened relationships, and carried grudges long before the cameras noticed. Not with enemies in the stands, but with people inside the game. Teammates, coaches, even mentors who once shaped him. Why would a player known for humility and professionalism bury emotions instead of confronting them? Why did certain relationships fade overnight? Without public explanation. Those close to him describe moments of silence that spoke louder than words. Dressing room tension, unreturned calls, trust quietly broken. And now, as his status reaches a new level, the stories begin to resurface. 5 names, 5 moments of fracture, 5 buried voices that helped shape the man Declan Rice became. And with that, we come to the list. Number 5, Mark Noble. For years, Mark Noble was more than a teammate to Declan Rice. He was the voice of the dressing room, the emotional spine of West Ham, and, in many ways, the man who helped raise Rice inside professional football. Insiders recall Noble shielding the young midfielder from early pressure, guiding him through mistakes, teaching him what it meant to carry responsibility at a club that lived and breathed loyalty. Rice listened, learned, followed. Their bond looked unbreakable. But football changes people faster than friendships can adapt. As Rice's influence grew, so did the distance. Sources close to the squad describe subtle friction, not explosive arguments, but a quiet power shift. Rice was no longer just the student. He was becoming the future captain, the centerpiece, the one the club revolved around. And that shift, insiders say, was never openly discussed. The tension peaked during moments when leadership overlapped. Decisions on the pitch, words spoken in the tunnel, silences after matches. Noble remained the emotional leader, but Rice carried the tactical authority. 2 captains in one room, neither willing to confront the imbalance directly. Then came the inevitable moment, Rice's departure. Publicly, everything looked respectful. Handshakes, smiles, statements of gratitude. But behind closed doors, witnesses describe a relationship that ended without closure. Conversations left unfinished, emotions left unsaid. A mentor watching his protege walk away, not just from the club, but from a shared past. Rice never criticized Noble. He didn't need to. The distance said enough. For Rice, it was a necessary separation. For Noble, it felt like the quiet end of an era. And that silence would echo into the next chapter. Number 4, David Moyes. When David Moyes rebuilt West Ham, Declan Rice was his cornerstone. Moyes trusted Rice absolutely, tactically, mentally, emotionally. He built a system around him, gave him authority beyond his age, and treated him as the future of the club. At first, it worked perfectly. Insiders say Moyes saw Rice not just as a player, but as proof of his own project. Discipline, structure, loyalty. Rice embodied all of it. But that same trust slowly became a silent source of tension. As Rice's performances reached elite level, the conversations changed. Rice wanted evolution, faster football, higher ambition, a team built to compete with Europe's elite. Moyes, shaped by experience and caution, prioritized control and stability. 2 visions, 1 dressing room. Sources close to the coaching staff recall moments where Rice questioned instructions, respectfully but firmly. Small tactical disagreements in meetings. A look exchanged on the touchline. Nothing public, nothing explosive, but enough to signal a growing divide. The breaking point wasn't a fight, it was realization. Rice understood that staying meant accepting limits. Moyes understood that holding Rice meant changing himself. Neither could do both. When Rice decided to leave, insiders say Moyes felt it deeply, not as betrayal, but as inevitability. Publicly, he praised Rice's character. Privately, witnesses describe a manager who knew he was losing the symbol of his rebuild. Their final conversations were calm, professional, almost cold. No accusations, no raised voices, just two men acknowledging that their paths no longer aligned. Rice left stronger. Moyes stayed behind with the echoes of what could have been. And if that separation shaped Rice's ambition, the next name shaped his identity on a national scale. Number 3. Gareth Southgate. For the outside world, the relationship between Declan Rice and Gareth Southgate appeared flawless. Trust, stability, a guaranteed starter in England's midfield. Rice was seen as the embodiment of Southgate's philosophy, disciplined, intelligent, emotionally controlled. But insiders tell a quieter, more complicated story. Behind closed doors, Rice was not always as free as he looked on the pitch. Sources within the England camp describe a player who felt boxed into a role, asked to protect, to balance, to stay safe. Rice followed instructions meticulously, but the desire to expand, to dominate games, to take more responsibility with the ball was often restrained. Meetings were respectful, yet rigid. Southgate valued structure above expression. Rice, entering his prime, wanted trust to push boundaries. The gap wasn't about talent, it was about freedom. One insider recalls a post-match discussion where Rice subtly questioned his positioning. The response was calm, but final. The system came first. Always. There was no fallout, no headlines, but something shifted internally. Rice began to understand that international football, under Southgate, would never fully reflect the player he believed he could become. He adapted, publicly loyal, privately restrained. The silence was strategic. Rice never challenged authority. He waited, learned, absorbed. But those close to him say this period hardened his mentality. It taught him patience and control over frustration. Because sometimes the loudest conflicts are the ones no one hears. And yet, the next name wasn't about structure or tactics. It was about identity. Number 2, the Republic of Ireland. Before Wembley. Before captain's armbands and record transfers, Declan Rice belonged somewhere else. He had worn the green shirt. He had sung a different anthem. And for a brief but meaningful time, he represented Republic of Ireland national football team, not as a guest, but as one of their own. Insiders describe those early call-ups as emotional. Rice felt pride, connection, family history pulling him in two directions. But as his club career accelerated, the pressure intensified. England watched closely. Ireland hoped quietly. And Rice stood in the middle, young, ambitious, and torn. The decision to switch allegiance was not sudden. Sources say it unfolded over months of internal conflict. Conversations with family, advisors, coaches, sleepless nights. It wasn't about money or fame. It was about identity versus destiny. When the switch became official, the fallout was immediate and brutal. Irish fans felt abandoned. Words like betrayal echoed across headlines and stadiums. Rice said nothing. He absorbed it all in silence. Those close to him recall how deeply it cut. Not the criticism, but the loss of belonging. A door closed forever. A version of himself left behind. From that moment on, Rice learned a harsh truth. Some choices define you not by what you gain, but by what you lose. He never responded publicly, never defended himself. The silence became his shield, and that unresolved fracture would shape the final and most personal conflict of all. Number 1. Himself. The hardest conflict in Declan Rice's career was never with a coach, a teammate, or a nation. It was with the person he became too early. Insiders close to Rice describe a player who learned, from a young age, to swallow emotion, to lead without cracking, to be responsible before being free. While others enjoyed the chaos of youth, Rice carried expectations that aged him faster than his peers. At West Ham, he became captain before he had finished growing into himself. With England, he became a symbol before he fully understood his own limits. Every mistake felt heavier. Every decision felt permanent. There was no room to fail loudly. Sources say Rice often questioned whether he was allowed to be imperfect, whether leadership meant silence, whether strength meant isolation. The move to Arsenal intensified everything: record fee, new environment, immediate pressure to justify his price, his status, his reputation. Those inside the club recall moments where Rice stayed behind after training, not to impress, but to reassure himself. He never complained, never deflected blame. But internally, the conflict grew. Was he playing to express himself, or to protect the image built around him? Friends noticed a change: more guarded, more controlled, less spontaneous. Rice had mastered responsibility, but at the cost of vulnerability. This was the conflict no one could see. No headlines, no quotes, just a constant internal negotiation between ambition and identity. And it set the stage for what came next, because just when it seemed Rice had everything under control, a single revelation would change how people understood his silence forever. The twist in Declan Rice's story didn't come from a scandal, a leaked quote, or a public confession. It came from something far more unsettling. Insiders reveal that during one of the most intense periods of his transition to Arsenal, Rice privately admitted to a staff member that he no longer knew when he was playing for himself, and when he was playing to survive expectations, not to fail, not to disappoint, not to give anyone a reason to doubt the image built around him. Those words were never meant for the public. What shocked those who heard it wasn't weakness, it was awareness. Rice understood that his silence, his composure, his perfect professionalism had slowly turned into a mask, a protective shell he couldn't easily remove. In private moments, witnesses describe a player who asked fewer tactical questions, and more personal ones, about pressure, about leadership, about how long someone can carry weight without putting it down. The twist is this: Rice didn't bury his voice because he was controlled by others. He buried it because he believed that was the price of becoming elite. And that belief changed everything. Because once you recognize the weight you're carrying, you're faced with a choice. The story of Declan Rice is not one of collapse or redemption. It is a story of containment. Today, Rice is stronger, more complete, more trusted than ever. A leader at Arsenal, a cornerstone for England. On the surface, everything points upward. But those close to him say the most important battle was never about trophies or transfers. It was about learning when to speak, and when silence becomes a burden. Rice did not explode. He did not rebel. He adapted. And in doing so, he learned a truth many never reach: that professionalism can protect you, but it can also isolate you. The voices he buried were not enemies. They were parts of himself shaped by loyalty, doubt, and expectation. What makes his story unsettling is not what he lost, but what he chose to carry. Because football celebrates discipline. It rewards control. It applauds leaders who never crack. But behind every composed figure, there is pressure the public never sees. Declan Rice's journey reminds us that greatness is not always loud. Sometimes it is built in silence, layer by layer, until even the strongest players must decide whether the voice they buried is meant to stay buried forever. And that is why his story still isn't finished.